In this beginner tutorial, I'll be showing you everything you need to know to get started with Photoshop. All right, first things first, once you open Photoshop, this is the page you'll be brought to. Now, you'll have some options here on the left, your recents here, and just some suggestions here from Photoshop. First thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna open a new file. So we're gonna click New File right here in Photoshop. You can choose the dimension of your files with some of these options at the top. I've got recent, these are my most used. You've got some photo ideas, some templates that you can download, print, art and illustration, so on and so forth. For this video, we're gonna just start with with our own dimensions. And so let's say, for instance, we're putting a photo together for Instagram. And dimensions are gonna be 1080 pixels by 1350. Resolution, you wanna keep it at 13 pixels per inch. All of this you can keep the same. You can change this to transparent if you like. I'm gonna keep my background as white, and I'm gonna click Create. All right, so now that we've got Photoshop open, you can see there's quite a bit going on here, but don't fret, I'll show you everything. So at the top here, you've got your navigation bar, like you will in almost every different application. If you go into workspace, you can choose which workspace you want to be in, right? And so I'm gonna click Essentials Default. This is gonna have just your essential standard layouts. If you have something specific you're trying to do, obviously, whether it's 3D, graphic and web, photography, so on and so forth, you can choose whatever you like. And then you can go on, or down here, you can choose what's actually showing. First things first, we need to get an image in here, right? And so there's a number of different ways you can do it. I typically do one of two. First option to pull a photo into Photoshop. So I'm gonna go over here into another folder. I'm gonna click and drag a folder directly into Photoshop. Now you can see that photo is in Photoshop. It's not the exact same dimensions here. And so we can change that. Let me hit Control T, which is to transform. I'm gonna stretch that up and stretch that down to fit the canvas size. There we go. We have our first photo into Photoshop. Another option you have if you wanna pull an image directly from a different editing application. For instance, I'm in Lightroom here. I'm gonna right click directly on this image. I'm gonna click Edit in Adobe Photoshop 2022. And what you should have is Photoshop should automatically open that exact image directly in Photoshop. And what's great about it is when you save it in Photoshop, it should save a copy directly into Lightroom. So that'll speed up your process if you're editing photos in a different application like Lightroom, for instance. Now, before we get into all the tools, I want to show you some of the layout of how Photoshop is actually set up. So again, I've got my window set up as the Essentials workspace. Up here, I've got some controls that directly correlate with whatever tool I have set up here. Up here, I've got tabs for different images that I may have open. On the right here, you'll have these bars. I've got history, I've got actions, which are macros that you can set up that automatically do certain steps when you're editing. Comments here as well if you're collaborating with others. I'm gonna close that. You've got your color panel here, swatches, you can do different gradients, patterns. Here's different properties for the specific layer that you have open, which you can add different adjustment layers here. And then here is where Photoshop really shines. It's in the amount of layers that you have. So right now, you can see I've got two different layers here. I've got this image, and if I turn the eyeball off on that one, you've got the background, which is just the white background. Under there, there's nothing, just a transparent background. And so we're gonna start with our move tool. And again, if we take that move tool and we move it around, you can see, oh, we've got that white background in the back here. If we were to turn off that background layer, you can now see it's the transparent layer behind. Let's put that back. We're gonna turn that background layer on. And then we're gonna go to the select tool. Now the select tool is kind of cool. So if you right click here, you also get access to the elliptical marquee tool and a number of others here. But we're gonna use the rectangular marquee tool. Let me show you how it works. And so you can use this to select different things within your image. You can copy them, you can move them, do whatever you like. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna select this with the marquee tool. And then I'm gonna hit Control Z for copy, and I'm gonna hit Control V to paste. Now you can see we've got another layer here. And if you click, you can see that layer is now, it's on its own. If I go back to the move tool, I can always move this and put it where I want. If I want to do a collage, you can always, maybe paste another one with Control J and put some more of these here, just depending on whatever you're doing with your image. So that's the marquee tool. You can also do elliptical, again, kind of the same idea here. Control J to duplicate. And then I've just got that image here, which I can play with and do other things as well. Now, whenever you're using different layers, you can always add different blending options to that layer. And so whenever you've got this layer selected, you can right click. There's a bunch of different options here but I want to do blending options. You can also get this by just double clicking on the layer as well. This gives you a number of different ways in which you can alter that specific layer. For instance, if I want to add a stroke to the outside, I'm going to click on this. I can actually click on stroke and then edit some of the things that I can do with that stroke selection. Like that, I can change it to inside versus outside. I can change the blend mode. I'm going to change the color of this one to red. And so we've got a red stroke on the outside of this line here. Control T to transform, and I'm just going to put that in the corner here, right? All right, so we're going to Control Z. I'm going to delete that layer. We don't need that layer. The next tool I'm going to show you is the marquee tool, or the lasso tool. And the lasso tool basically allows you to freehand select certain things within your image. So let's say, for instance, I want to select Yuri here in this image. I'm going to go around here, come up, and now you can see I've got this selected of just Yuri. I'm going to hit Command J or Control J on Windows. And then as you can see, if I get rid of the back layer, you've got it kind of smoothed out. This just kind of picked up of Yuri. And again, you can do whatever you like with this. You can add certain images. One thing that you guys will notice is it's not very precise, right? The lasso tool is good for that. I'm going to delete that layer. I'm going to show you how to get a little bit more precise. Photoshop is really intuitive and can select a lot of things for you. And so I'm going to go in here to the select option at the top. I'm going to click select the subject. It's going to process and it's going to try its hardest to select just the subject. And as you guys can see, we've got the subject selected, right? Everything within these lines is what Photoshop picked up as our subject, which is great, right? There are a few things missing here that we may want to add, and that's where the quick selection tool is going to come in. So I'm going to select on the quick selection tool, and you can see the options here. Since I've already got a selection, I don't need to click new selection. It's automatically in the add to selection, but you can also subtract from the selection that you've got. And so I want to add the back of this dress here, right? And so I'm just going to hold Alt, I'm going to hold the right click button, and I'm going to go left and right in order to make my brush size bigger on the selection tool. You can also change the hardness by going up and down by keeping that right mouse button selected. Right, I'm going to go here. I'm going to make it about that big. There we go. And I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see Photoshop kind of automatically added a few pieces. I'm going to add this piece in, and then I'm going to make it smaller. Hold Alt to subtract the selection. I'm going to subtract some of these pieces out. There. We got this selected. Some of the hair is not selected up in this area, so I'm going to just select some of this as well. There we go. And I'm going to hit Control J. And now you can see I've got her selected a lot more precisely than she was in the last image. You can obviously get a little bit more granular and clean that up a little bit more. And there's a number of different ways to actually remove like the background colors from that. But for this, I just wanted you guys to see how the quick selection tool worked. The next tool I want to show you guys is the healing brush tool. Now this tool can be used for a number of different reasons. I specifically use it for cleaning up little parts of your image, like maybe like blemishes in the skin, acne, or stray hairs, which I'm about to show you here. So I'm going to zoom into this photo here, and there's a few different hairs here that we could potentially clean up, and let me show you how it works. So using the healing brush tool, I'm going to hold Alt to select an area in the image we want to pull from. And for this specific part, I'm going to click right here, and then I'm going to clean these hairs up a little bit. And so I'm going to click, and you can see where Photoshop is pulling from in order to clean these parts up, right? I'm going to click here, get in here and clean some of that up. Same thing, click there, hold Alt, click here, and just clean some of those hairs on up. I like to be relatively close to the area I'm cleaning up in order for the colors to correspond with the work that I'm doing. So let's get in here. Same thing here, let's clean some of that up. And as you see, you keep selecting new places and so on and so forth. As you can see, sometimes it's a little imperfect, and so you've got a little bit of blurriness here. Don't really like the way that looks, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. This tool goes hand in hand with the patch tool in a few different ways, but let's go ahead and select that. So we're going to click the clone stamp tool here, and this one, instead of it using Photoshop's engine to figure out what you're trying to pull, it pulls precisely what you're doing. And so I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna select from this area, maybe this darker area right here. And I'm gonna go in here and just start brushing in there. Good, let's do these. Good. Now there is a little bit of lightness here versus the rest of the hair, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna select some of these hairs here and just kind of, oh, that's too heavy. Let me go to my brush up here. I'm gonna change my flow to about 5%. This is gonna determine how much is going from into the image whenever I click down and move my mouse around. Let's do that again. Let's go in here. Yeah, we're just gonna slowly paint some of that in. There we go. Awesome. And as you can see, we've cleaned that area up quite a bit. Now I'm going to show you guys one other thing, because what I was doing was editing directly on top of this layer. You can actually edit in a more non-destructive way in case you want to go back. Obviously, you can always undo, but let me show you what I mean. So let's say, for instance, I want to do this exact same thing. I'm going to create a new layer, right? This is a layer that's on top of these other layers, but it's transparent. And so you can't see it at the very moment. I'm going to use the clone stem tool one more time. But this time, I'm going to change the sample to current and below. So we're going to sample this layer below this layer. What I mean is, when I click my sample, it's going to be pulling from the layer below, and I'm just going to paint on here, and we're going to clean up a few of these stray hairs here. Clean those up. Now obviously I could spend a lot more time doing this and be a little bit more precise, but you get the picture. But now, as you can see, this is without, this is with, this is without, this is with. And then that brings me to another tool, because you can actually see, oh, there's a little bit of brushing here. And if you look hard enough, I mean, you know, obviously you can't see it here, but if you're a perfectionist like me, you may want to clean that up a little bit too. I'm going to pull up the mixer brush tool. So this is the brush tool. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click the mixer brush. And what that does is it acts like a wet paintbrush, and it basically cleans up the layer, the colors and the texture of whatever you brush. So I'm going to just brush in here to just kind of clean up that. And I can be relatively heavy-handed sometimes, because I know I can just click undo and then continue. But as you can see, oh, that doesn't look good. There we go. You can see how now you just painted that in. Next, I want to show you guys the gradient tool, because I think this can be used in a number of different ways when it comes to creative, whether you're doing photography or marketing pieces, things of that nature. I'm going to pull up the gradient tool. Under the paint bucket, I'm going to click a gradient tool. All right, so now that I've got my gradient tool selected, I'm going to create a new layer so that I don't directly edit over this layer. So I'm going to create a new layer, and then I'm going to add this gradient here, right? I'm going to select which direction I want it to go. So if I want it to go directly left to right, boom, I can do left to right. If I want it to go in diagonal, boom, I can go diagonal. And there's different colors that you can select here as well, obviously, right? You can go in here. I'm going to pick a specific, let's go to photographic toning. I actually like this one, but you've got different options here. So say, for instance, I want to add a gradient here. Actually, let's go this way. Oh, sorry, let's go this way. I'm going to add that gradient, but then maybe I just want it to apply to certain different ways. But let's change the way it's blended so that we can actually see it, right? There's a bunch of different blend modes, right? We got darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn. These are going to be closest to what you can see here in the image, right? Lighter color. And then you've got some overlays here that can add some artistic vibe into your photo. So I'm going to do soft light here, right? And then you can come in here, you can change the opacity, how much of that is within the image. Maybe we just want a soft little gradient here, which is great. But then I'm going to show you something really awesome. Two things. The first, I'm going to go back to this layer. Let me turn this layer off for now. I'm going to select just my subject. So I'm going to hit select subject. And then I'm going to make a different layer with just my subject. So let's bring the subject out here. Now I'm going to apply that gradient only to my subject layer, right? So if I pull that out, you can see I've got my subject here. And actually, let's go back in here. Let's pull out our quick selection tool. Let's add all of this. We're gonna take that out. Good. Now we're gonna make a new layer. Now you can see I've just got my subject here, and I wanna apply this gradient only to my subject. So let's turn that layer on. As you can see, it's only applied here, but if I turn this on, you can see it's applied to the entire image. I don't want that. I wanna create a clipping mask. I want this layer to only apply to the layer directly below it. Two ways you can do this. I can right click here and click create clipping mask. Boom, and it only applies that to this layer, which is my subject. The other way you can do that, and Control Z, you can hold Alt and then click the layers in between and it'll clip directly there. Awesome, right? Yeah, so I'm gonna turn that down just a little bit. Let's see what that looks like by clicking the eyeball. Yeah, adds a little bit of color, sure. We'll leave that like it is. I also want to show you how to add text to an image. So you can hit the text tool here, or you can hit T on your keyboard for text. And then I'm going to type some text here. Maybe I'll type river. Oh, look at that color. I'm sure that's not the color that we want. So I'm going to select that. Let's pick a different color. Maybe we'll just go with white. And again, what's awesome about having different layers here is I'm going to make this a little bigger. And then I'm going to put this layer underneath my subject layer. Boom. And we've got it right there in the background. Right? That's the beauty of Photoshop, right? You've got this directly in the background. You've got the layer on top of it, and you can put whatever you want on top of it. Doesn't really distract from the image. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add a stroke. I'm going to add a stroke to the photo. And then I want to show you one last tool, which is the rectangle tool. So I'm going to go in here. This is the line tool. I'm going to right click, and you can see there's a bunch of different shapes you can use. I'm going to use the rectangle tool. And what this allows you to do is add different shapes to your photo, right? You can do, whatever you like, add different patterns, put it underneath on top. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a rectangle going across here. We're going to change the color of that rectangle. I'm going to add a color overlay of, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK here. And then I'm going to come down here to my river effects tool. I'm going to put that, let me put the river above the rectangle. Cool. Now I'm going to just resize this so that it fits right there in the rectangle. I'm going to stretch it, but I'm going to hold Shift to stretch it, just going across, something like that, right? And you can do all sorts of cool stuff like that. Maybe I'm going to take the river and rectangle here. I'm going to group them together by hitting Control G. And I'm going to take the entire group. I want to rotate that. And maybe I just want it to be going across the top of the image, just like that. Again, holding Shift. Right? Like I said, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do here, but I just want to show you a few of the basic tools that you need here for Photoshop. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know down below if this tutorial was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next video.